There you see now how all your so-called power counts for absolutely nothing. How your entire empire of destruction comes crashing down, all because of one little cherry. One little. What a lovely ballet. It seems so full of form and color. One
I wanted to do something a little bit different today. I wanted to talk about how a mood reader picks their books. So I am primarily a mood reader, and I definitely like to read what I want to read. I do pick books to fit into certain themes or readathons each month. In June, I was reading almost exclusively queer books of one variety or another, so I had a much more limited pool to pick from when I was choosing my reads. But I still read by whim. Some of the books that I really wanted to get to in the beginning of the month, I didn't end up getting to because at that moment picking the books, it wasn't the book that I picked up. So I thought it would be fun to do a vlog in July where I just talk you through how I make the decision to read each of my next books. I am currently reading The Subtweet on audio. This is a book by Vivek Shreya that I started in June. So I'm reading that on audio. I only have a little bit left to go on that. I haven't picked my next or even really thought about what I'm going to read for my next audio book, but I just finished my last physical book on the last day in June, so it is time for me to pick my first July read. Before I went to work, I picked up a bunch of books that I thought I might want to physically read next. I knew in my mind that I wanted like a shorter book. I've been reading fairly long books, not super long. The last book I read was like over 300 pages, and I knew I wanted something pretty short and something either contemporary but more realistic, because the books that I've been reading have been a little bit whimsical, I guess. I read Freshwater, which is, although a contemporary book, has really interesting kind of fantasy elements, even though it's not really fantasy either. I read some of the Amistad Mop and Tales of the Cities books recently, and those are extremely whimsical and fun and silly. So I was like, I want something that's a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more serious, or better yet, a modern classic, something that was written between 1900 and 1950, because I haven't read any books from that period for a while, and that's one of my favorite periods of writing. So I just really fast picked up the 4 books that I saw, and those were The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson, Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, John Banville's The Sea, and The Ballad of the Sand Cafe by Carson McCullers. I happened to be at work and be able to read the first couple of lines or pages of each of these books. None of these books were quite right for what I had in mind. The reasons that these didn't work: this had sex in the very first pages, which is fine, but I wasn't in the mood. This had a very strange writing style, and although it's quite short, it was going to be difficult to get through. And one of the reasons for picking a short book was that I wanted an easy, or at least less challenging book than some of the other books that I had been reading. This seemed really good and was a possibility, but also seemed a little dry is not really the right word, but not exactly the vibe that I was going for. The closest that I got after looking at these first 4 books was The Ballad of the Side Cafe and Other Stories. Now, this is a short story collection, and it is one that, oh, that's better. And it is one that I want to get to, and I was really intrigued by the first couple of lines. But The Ballad of the Side Cafe is only like 70 or 80 pages, and I think I don't want a short story collection, and I don't want a book that I can't read the whole book of. What I had been really wanting to read, in my mind, what I thought was the book that I was going to read was The Last Picture Show, but when I was looking for those books, I couldn't find that one. So when I got home, I found The Last Picture Show because I had more time, and I found 3 other short-ish books that I've been wanting to read or reread, and I took a look at those as well. Under the Jaguar Sun by Italo Calvino, The Bookshop by Penelope Fitzgerald, and Castle Perilous by Dawn DeChancy. I read the first several pages or lines of each of these books as well, and this is why I decided against them. Under the Jaguar Sun is a collection of short stories, so it might be good to pair with reading some short stories. One of the issues that I have with short stories is that if I read them all in a row, they all blur together and I can't remember which is which. I have a really hard time with that, but it's a possibility to maybe read 2 short story collections together, especially if they're very different, and then be able to oscillate between the 2. The Bookshop was a possibility. This one is extremely short. It's just kind of a straightforward story. I think it was written in 1978, so it is not exactly a modern classic time era, but it is an older book, so this was definitely a possibility. And then Castle Perilous is a book that I've been wanting to reread, but it is high fantasy, and I'm not really in the mood for high fantasy. So I also looked at The Last Picture Show by Larry McMurtry in that group of books, and this one was also very intriguing. It does have some of the vibes that I was looking for. It was written in 1966. Something about it was right, but also something about it was wrong. There already was, I don't know, a vibe of like small town depression that I wasn't super into. I had these 2 that I was thinking of now, but when I looked the next morning, I picked up these 2 books, and I decided that maybe what I really wanted was an older mystery. J.K. Chesterson's The Innocence of Father Brown is what the Father Brown TV series is based on, and there is a whole series of books. But it starts out with Father Brown's kind of nemesis, and I've read the first page or 2 like 3 or 4 times now, and it just isn't grabbing me the way I wanted to. But then I remembered Wisteria Cottage by Robert M. Coates. I love this cover. And this was written in 1948. It is a psychological horror, possibly actual physical horror, and it kind of fit the mystery vibes. You don't know exactly what's going to happen with this horror story. It definitely fit the time period that I was looking for, and when I read the first couple of pages, it was very interesting and engaging. It starts out with a psychiatrist's note, a very short psychiatrist note, and then goes into the meat of the story. So I decided to read Wisteria Cottage. So that's the first book that I chose to read, and my whole decision making for reading it. I did pick up Catwise, and this is a picture book from the 70s. It is a book of photo essays. The author, Wilbur Pippin, was a photographer living on the East Coast in America, in New England, and he took lots of photos of his cats, and then it was put to different quotes from various authors, writers, philosophers, etc. I picked this up in June at a Salvation Army, and I just really liked the black and white photography. I loved the 70s vibes of this coffee table picture book, so I wanted to pick it up and read it, which I did this morning. My favorite part of Catwise was in the back. There are pictures of every cat and their names, which really made the entire book for me. When I choose my next book to read, whether that be an audiobook or a physical book, I will pop in here and tell you how I chose it. It is July 6th, and I have picked some new books. So I was reading Wisteria Cottage, and this was giving me the modern classic 1900 to 1950s vibes that I was looking for, but it wasn't really giving mystery. It was more giving psychological horror and impending dread, which wasn't quite doing it for me. I was really enjoying this book, and I did get to page 53. So I will be continuing this one, but I wanted something a little bit more pacey and a little less depressing. So I ended up picking up The Red Lamp. When I wanted something that was mystery, thrillery, and modern classic, I thought this would be the one. But actually, The Red Lamp by Mary Roberts Reinhardt is more of a cozy mystery in Agatha Christie style, so that is now what I'm reading. I also did finish my audiobook, and I moved on to another audiobook. And the way that I picked that audiobook was to just scroll my audiobook sites. I have several where I can get audiobooks for free, and I just took a look at them until I decided on one that I wanted. To see my reaction to all these books and to see my final thoughts, to see which books I picked if I don't specifically name them, you will have to wait for my July wrap-up. And I do all of my wrap-ups vlog style, so you will see my thoughts pretty much as I think them. It's been a minute since I checked in with you. Got to see some of the books that I was trying out. I also showed you how I ended up picking The Hunting Party on audio. For my next audiobook, I think I'm going to read Devolution by Max Brooks, which I do have a physical copy of, but I just heard Melted Books say that this was really good on audio, so I'm going to give that a try tonight while I'm at work, see if I like it. If I do, and then that will be my next audio pick. I am trying to kind of read some like eco or cli-fi books in July, so that is kind of my goal, and that is one of the ones that I wanted to read. I also really wanted to read Ecotopia, and the reason that I didn't pick this last time was because it was in diary form, and the book that I had read prior, The Red Lamp, was also in diary form. The next book that I might pick up might be Ecotopia. I might go back to Wisteria Cottage because I did want to finish this, but I also need to read my TBR Tackle book for July, but I'm leaning towards one of these three. You can see as a mood reader that I bounce around a lot and I pick a lot of different things. Maybe I pick something up, maybe I decide that that's not the right thing, maybe I try an audiobook and I'm not feeling it, so I go to something else. I'm glad that I have a lot of books to pick from, but I do have a loose general sense of like the books that I want to be reading as well. I mean, I have piles and piles of books now. I'm definitely trying to read things that I like, read things that I enjoy, pick things that I want to read, but sometimes those don't work out, so I have to move on to the next thing. And again, that's just the life of a mood reader. As a mood reader, my mood often changes, or I find that when I go to read something, it's too similar to something else that's already happened with the idea of two epistolary novels right in a row. Yesterday, I looked at both of these books for my next physical book, and I was almost positive I was going to go with Ecotopia, but then I started reading Devolution, and this is done in epistolary form, and these are actually very similar themes. I know this is about Bigfoot, but it also has to do with a like eco community village, and this has to do with an eco community village as well. Reading this and wanting to read this one kind of put the kibosh on reading this. So I went back to the drawing board. I picked a few more books that I just was interested in. I've been thinking about space opera a lot. I know Fully Booked recently read this. This is on my summer TBR. I also happened to see All Systems Red on my pile, and this looked intriguing. And then I still have Wisteria Cottage that I want to finish. Also right on my shelf was The Silent Companions. I heard about this book really early on in my booktube viewing slash career, and I had been wanting to read it. So I started reading this last night. I just read a little bit to see if I was interested in it, and then this morning I got further into it, and now I'm on page 67. So this will be my next physical book. So those were most of the books that I chose to read in the month of July. I did just want to look at my July TBR. I don't really make traditional TBRs, but I do TBR ASMRs every month, and those are books that I want to read that month, but they're not necessarily thought out or planned out TBRs. They're usually just books that are appealing to me at the time of making the ASMR videos. And those books were Appleseed by Matt Bell, Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich, Devolution by Max Brooks, and Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. Out of the 4 books that I had on my TBR for that month, I did actually read one of them. Mood reading took me in the direction of reading Devolution. What did we learn from this experiment? I don't think we really learned anything. I think if you are a mood reader, you will know that mood reading is trial and error a lot of times. It is picking up books, reading a few pages, not getting into them, and then putting them down. Sometimes it's reading half a book and DNFing it. Sometimes it's not being able to follow a traditional TBR. And I think that's why there are usually very traditional TBR people and there are mood readers, because there's no rhyme or reason to what you're going to read necessarily. Yes, you might set out a few things that you want to read, and you might even hit a goal of reading something, like I hit my goal of reading my TBR tackle book every month, but you kind of have to really consciously put that in there. And even with a goal like the TBR tackle book, I have to be in the right mood for it. I can't always read it when I want to read it. I can't read it first thing in the month a lot of times. I have to kind of gear myself up for it. So mood reading takes you all over the map. One good side effect to having a large TBR, which I am accumulating more and more every day, is that you have plenty of things to choose from and to decide between and to read a few pages of and put down, or pick up something totally random and read that for the month. I think if I had a smaller TBR, that would be fine too, because I do think that I would just end up reading from that TBR. Although I'm a mood reader, it doesn't mean that if I didn't have the exact right book, I wouldn't read something. I would eventually land on something that fit my mood. And that was a month of me mood reading and picking almost every book that I read in the month of July. Are you a mood reader? Do you like to read by whim? Or are you an organized and scheduled reader who likes to plan all their reading? AJ Dunn Reads and Writes has a very interesting way of picking their TBR. They pick their TBR for the entire year, and they know what they're going to read every month of the year, and then only slot in mood reading things when they have the time. Meg with Books is very similar. She picks her books for the videos that she's doing, and a lot of booktubers will pick their books for the videos. I am a all over the place, willy-nilly mood reader. What are you? Thanks so much for joining me for this experimental video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!